Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. I seem to be on a bit of a roll with the tricky bit this month, as this is the third video out of 4 dedicated to the first section of it. In the previous video in the series, I'd glued down the points and soldered dropper wires to the track. I ended the video showing a list of things that needed to be done to complete the section. At this point, I'm going to add some more items to the list. Firstly, after refitting the track, I'd like to check the track's electrical connectivity before committing to gluing it down. Secondly, I'd like to split the install in train room task into 4 separate tasks. Number 1 is to position the section in its final location on the layout. Number 2 is to connect the dropper wires to the DCC bus. Number 3 is to connect the servo motors to the servo controller and calibrate them to switch the points. And number 4 is to add autofrogs to the frog wires of the points. So, in this video, I'll continue to work down the list and we'll see how far I get. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see a loco running by the end of the video. Okay, so now the points were secured, the point running was in place and the dropper wires were attached, it was time to refit the rest of the track. It was difficult to believe that so many wires were required to power such a small section of track. There were wires everywhere, and I soon ran into a problem. Where I'd attached the dropper wires in pairs, they'd become quite stiff. This was making it difficult to get the wires to drop into their holes, meaning that the track wouldn't sit flat on the roadbed, which in turn made it impossible to get the rail joiners to connect. The solution was to split the dropper wires in 2. Unfortunately, this effectively doubled the number of wires, which made for an even more chaotic work area. With so many wires, taking things slowly and methodically was definitely the key to success. I eventually got the track and wiring under control and all of the track pieces were joined up to the points. I'd already checked that all of the dropper wires were electrically connected to their associated piece of track. However, now that all of the track had been joined together physically, I wanted to check if it was joined together electrically. I could have used my multimeter in continuity mode to do this, but instead decided to power the dropper wires using a 9V battery, and then use my GaugeMaster track tester to check if the power was making it to the rails. I made my way around each pair of dropper wires and made sure that the track tester lit up when I connected the battery. Once I'd tested a pair of dropper wires, I added some electrical tape to them, just so I knew which ones I'd already tested. Because of the way Unifrog points are wired, it shouldn't matter which red and black wires were connected, and it shouldn't matter where on the track the tester was placed. Basically, the LED on the track tester should illuminate whenever power was connected between any black and red wire. I checked every set of dropper wires and different combinations of red and black wires, all with the track tester placed in various positions on the track. And the LED lit up as expected every time. Apparently, miracles do happen. Now that I was happy with the electrical connections, I could go ahead and glue the track down. I did this by removing the staples from one section of track at a time. I lifted the track and spread some copy decks onto the roadbed. I then reconnected the track to its point and reaffixed the staples to keep the track in place, not forgetting to use my homemade track setter pieces where appropriate. What I nearly forgot to do was to push the sleepers back into place to restore their uniform spacing. or at least as uniform a spacing as the dropper wires would allow. Once the sleepers had been adjusted, I used some engineering blocks to weigh down the track pieces until the glue dried. Copydex tends to dry quite quickly, but I ended up leaving everything for 24 hours before removing the engineering blocks and most of the staples. I left some of the staples in place on the curved areas of the track, just as a precaution against the track springing out of shape, although I'm pretty sure that this wasn't necessary, and I was being overcautious. Now that the glue was dry, it was time to position the tricky bit section on the baseboard. Before slotting the section into place, I added some servo extension cables to the channel where the servo wiring would run. The extension cables were required so that I could remove the servos should they fail, but still have servo wiring above the baseboard. There was still a chance that the extension cable could slip below the layout while disconnected. So I created a Greyboard collar that could be slipped over one end of the extension cable but was too small for the other end to pass through. The collar was also too big to fall down the hole, so kept the extension cable safely above the baseboard. The next step was to drop the servo wires through the foam. Then it was time to break out one of the most integral parts of a modeller's toolkit: tins of baked beans. I used the tins to hold the section above where it was going to be fitted. This made it easier to align the dropper wires with their holes. I'd already friction fitted straws into the holes to make the holes smooth-sided, so that the wires wouldn't snag on the much coarser XPS foam and plywood. I'd also taped up the ends of the dropper wires with electrical tape to ensure that the bare ends wouldn't catch on the edge of the straws. Before I started pushing wires through the holes, I connected up the servo extension cables to the servos. Next, I pushed the myriad of dropper and frog wires through their associated holes in the foam. Once all of the wires were sitting happily in their hole, I removed a course of tins to lower the section and pushed the wires further into the holes. It was an extremely fiddly process, but I finally got the section sitting roughly in place. I say roughly because it wasn't sitting completely flat. This was because one or more of the wires hadn't fully retreated into its hole. Thankfully, this was easy to solve, and I ventured below the layout to gently pull on the wires to free them up. I'd left the camera running on the baseboard so you could see the effect it had. Unfortunately, instead of seeing this, my camera fell over, and I managed to capture absolutely nothing at all. Oh well. The good news was that as a result of pulling on the wires, a section of the tricky bit was now sitting in place and ready to be powered up. It was now time to connect the dropper wires to some power. Now, I have a cunning plan to reconfigure the DCC bus to add power distribution locations around the layout. From there, it will be possible to feed multiple dropper wires with power. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to implement that yet. So, instead, I've connected up half of the dropper wires directly to the DCC bus to temporarily get some power into the section. Okay, so I've temporarily extended the new section by adding some lengths of track to both sides of it. It was now time to run a loco on a real part of Shelfington for the very first time. And of course, the honour went to my Class 33. Isn't that just brilliant? Okay, so that's about it for this update. Just to recap, here's the list of tasks that we started with, so let's see where we are now. The track was refitted to the section and then checked for electrical connectivity. The track was then glued down, and the section taken to the train room. Once in the train room, the section was positioned on the baseboard and was ready for powering up. While I can't claim that the section is fully integrated into the DCC bus, it is powered, but I'll leave this task incomplete until I've implemented the power distribution locations. So, another landmark moment has occurred, with the first loco running on a real section of Shelfington. How exciting is that? Of course, there are still things to do here. The servos need to be connected to the servo controller and then calibrated. Auto frogs need to be added to the points, and the power needs to be properly connected. However, I've been incredibly pleased with the progress I've made on the tricky bit this month, and can definitely see that the end is in sight for this section. As usual, let me know what you think. Alternatively, if you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in Engage modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then please do so in the comment section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update on my progress soon. Bye.